It was a crisp Tuesday morning, the kind where the cold air bites your skin, but the sun makes everything seem a little too perfect. Jessica had just left for work, her usual hurried goodbye followed by the slam of the door. I lingered in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, feeling an odd sense of contentment. We had been married for 6 years, and things seemed smooth until they weren't. That was when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting a work email or some notification, but my breath caught in my throat when I saw the message. "I thought you should know what Jessica's been up to." The words stared back at me, unsettling in their simplicity. My thumb hovered over the screen as my heart raced. I didn't know the number, and for a moment I thought it might be some scam or prank. But curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the message. A photo loaded. My stomach lurched. It was Jessica. She was sitting in a dimly lit bar, leaning in far too close to a man I didn't recognize. His hand was casually resting on her leg, her expression one of playful intimacy I hadn't seen in months. No, years. My hands shook, and I nearly dropped the phone. The picture was undeniable. This wasn't some innocent conversation. This was betrayal. 1,000 thoughts flooded my mind all at once. Confusion, anger, disbelief. How could this happen? How long had it been going on? And why didn't I see it before? I stood there frozen, replaying every recent interaction in my mind, trying to find the signs I had clearly missed. It all made sense now. The late-night work trips, the secretive texts, her constant need to catch up with friends. I had pushed my doubts aside, assuming I was being paranoid. But now, with this photo, it was all laid bare. Jessica was having an affair. The perfect life I thought we had was a facade. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. Confronting her now would be too easy. I needed more than a single photo. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't weasel her way out of. So, I called in sick to work and spent the day investigating, feeling like a detective in my own marriage. It didn't take long for everything to unravel. Her phone records, social media posts, and even her bank statements painted a picture of deceit that stretched back months. The final blow came when I found a hotel reservation she'd made the previous weekend. The name of the man from the photo was right there on the bill. That evening, Jessica came home like nothing had happened. She walked through the door with a smile, kissed me on the cheek, and went on about her day. I played along, forcing a smile and asking her how work had been. She was good, too good. Her lies came so naturally, like she had rehearsed them for days. I realized in that moment just how far gone she really was. But I wasn't going to explode. Not yet. I was going to wait for the perfect moment to confront her, to make sure she knew exactly what I had discovered. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had changed, watching her closely, collecting more evidence while she continued her charade. It was Friday when I decided to set a trap. I told her I'd be working late on a project and wouldn't be home until midnight. She barely blinked, just gave me her usual, "Oh, okay, good luck," before heading to bed early. But instead of going to work, I parked 2 blocks away from the house, watching and waiting. Around 9 p.m., I saw her leave, dressed in the same black dress she had worn to our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. My heart pounded as I started my car and followed her, careful to keep a safe distance. She drove across town to a hotel. Yes, the same one from the receipt, and walked in without a second thought. I pulled into a nearby parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. There it was, the proof I needed. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not tonight. I needed this to be perfect. My anger simmered beneath the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. I watched as she greeted the man from the photo, her face lighting up in a way that I hadn't seen in years. They embraced, and I could feel my chest tighten with rage. I took out my phone and started recording. Every second of their interaction was burned into my mind. They kissed like lovers reunited after a long separation, completely unaware that I was capturing every moment. I had everything I needed, and now it was just a matter of timing. The drive home was silent, my mind racing with thoughts of how I would confront her. It wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about making sure she understood exactly what she had done. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. The next morning, she woke up bright and cheerful, acting like everything was fine. She suggested we spend the day together, maybe go for a hike or have a lazy day watching movies. I smiled and agreed, but inside, I was seething. As we sat on the couch later that afternoon, I decided it was time. I turned to her and said, "Jessica, we need to talk." She looked up, a little confused but still relaxed. "Sure, what's up?" I pulled out my phone, the video already queued up, and handed it to her without a word. The look on her face when she saw it was priceless. Her eyes widened in shock, and her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I can explain," she stammered, but I wasn't interested in her explanations. I leaned back, crossing my arms, letting her squirm in the silence that followed. "Go ahead," I said coolly. "Explain." Jessica blinked rapidly, her face a mixture of shock and desperation. "It's not what it looks like," she began, her voice trembling. "He's just an old friend, someone I reconnected with." "It's an old friend," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "An old friend you sneak off to hotels with? An old friend you kiss like that?" I pointed at the screen, where her and the man's intimate embrace played on repeat. "Please, Jessica, give me something better than that," she faltered, her confident demeanor crumbling. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling for a lie that would save her. But she knew there was no way out, not with the evidence I had in my hands. She sat there, silent, her eyes darting between me and the phone. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she finally whispered, her voice so soft I almost didn't hear it. It just happened. Things between us haven't been the same for a while, and I don't know. I was feeling lonely. It was a mistake." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "A mistake? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back. That's not a mistake, Jessica. That's a choice. A choice you made over and over again." She flinched at my words, her hands trembling in her lap. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I felt like you weren't there for me anymore, like we were drifting apart." "Oh, so this is my fault now?" I shot back, incredulous. "You've been cheating on me, and now you're trying to blame me for it?" "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'm not blaming you, I swear. I don't know how things got so bad between us. I don't know how to fix it." I stared at her, the anger boiling just beneath the surface. How could she sit here, playing the victim, acting like she was the one who had been hurt? She had shattered our life together, and now she wanted sympathy. "There's no fixing this," I said, my voice cold and final. "You made your choice, Jessica, and now you have to live with it." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I mean we're done," I said firmly. "I'm filing for divorce. You can pack your things and get out." The color drained from her face. "Wait, what?" No, please, we can work through this. I know I messed up, but we can fix it. I'll go to therapy, we can go to counseling, whatever it takes. Just please don't throw everything away." I looked at her, this woman I had once loved, now reduced to a desperate, pleading version of herself. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just a cold, empty resolve. "It's already gone, Jessica. You threw it away the moment you started lying to me. You think I can just forget everything I've seen, everything you've done?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "No, I just don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose us." "Well, you should have thought of that before," I said, standing up. "This conversation is over. Pack your things." She sat there for a moment, as if hoping I might change my mind. But when she realized I wasn't going to budge, she stood up shakily and headed to the bedroom, her sobs echoing in the hallway. I sat back down on the couch, the adrenaline of the confrontation leaving me drained. I stared at the blank TV screen, the silence of the house pressing in around me. This was it, the end of everything we had built together. But as much as it hurt, I knew it was the right decision. There was no going back. I stayed seated on the couch, staring blankly at the spot where Jessica had stood moments ago, pleading with me. But her tears didn't move me anymore. My mind was already elsewhere, focused on what came next. The house felt different now, like a weight had been lifted, though it was hard to say if that feeling was liberation or simply the aftermath of everything falling apart. A few minutes later, I heard her moving around in the bedroom, opening drawers, her footsteps soft but deliberate. She was packing just like I'd asked. Part of me expected more resistance from her. Another round of tears or maybe anger, but there was only silence. It was strange how fast it was all crumbling. But the faster, the better. There was no salvaging this. I pulled out my phone and scrolled mindlessly through messages, updates, anything to distract me from the surreal nature of the situation. I paused on a text from Tyler, my best friend from college. He had sent me a simple message a week ago. "You good, man?" At the time, I had brushed it off with a casual, "Yeah, just busy." But now I realized how much I had been hiding even from myself. I typed out a new message. "It's over with Jessica. She was cheating. Divorce incoming." A few seconds later, the reply came. "Holy sh***. Want me to come over?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to be alone in this mess, to process the fallout in silence. But I also knew I could use some company. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions, who would just sit with me in the wreckage. I texted back, "Yeah, come over." I shoved my phone back into my pocket and stood up, walking toward the bedroom. The door was ajar, and through the crack, I could see Jessica packing her things into a small suitcase. She wasn't crying anymore, just moving with a numb efficiency, like she had accepted the inevitable. "Do you need any help?" I asked, my voice flat. She looked up, startled, and shook her head. "No, I've got it." There was nothing more to say. I nodded and walked back to the living room, the tension between us stretching like a frayed rope. I didn't care about her explanation anymore. The facts were laid bare, and there was no reversing the damage. A few minutes later, I heard her footsteps coming down the hallway. She stopped in the doorway, her suitcase in hand, eyes red from crying but face set in a strange mix of defeat and anger. I could see the struggle in her expression. One part of her wanted to fight, the other part resigned to the outcome. "I'll stay with a friend," she muttered, her voice strained. "I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything that wouldn't escalate the situation. This wasn't the time for more confrontation. We had already crossed the line. She hesitated for a moment, as if waiting for me to say something, anything that might soften the blow. But when I remained silent, she let out a long, shaky breath and walked out the door. The soft click of it closing behind her felt like the final punctuation on a long, painful sentence. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been. It was quiet now, almost peaceful, but it was a peace laced with the sting of betrayal. My marriage, my life as I knew it, was over, and in its place, a cold emptiness settled. Tyler arrived about half an hour later, knocking on the door in his usual laid-back way. When I opened it, he took one look at me and shook his head. "Man, I don't even know what to say," he muttered, stepping inside and pulling me into a quick, brotherly hug. "You doing okay?" I shrugged, heading to the kitchen and grabbing 2 beers from the fridge. I don't know what okay looks like anymore. We sat down on the couch, the clink of the beer bottles the only sound breaking the silence. Tyler didn't press me for details. He didn't need to. He knew the basics, and that was enough for now. He just sat there, sipping his beer, giving me the space to speak when I was ready. After a long silence, I finally spoke. She was cheating for months, maybe longer. I don't even know when it started. Tyler nodded slowly, taking it all in. "Damn. Yeah," I muttered, taking a swig of beer. I found out through some random text. Then I started digging, and it just all fell apart. He didn't say anything, just gave a low whistle, clearly processing the scope of the betrayal. Tyler had always been a guy who spoke with actions rather than words. and right now, his presence was enough. She's gone now, I continued, more to myself than to him. She packed up and left, staying with a friend or something. Tyler looked at me, his eyes serious. You made the right call. You don't deserve that ***. I know, I said, though part of me still felt the weight of everything crashing down. But it doesn't make it any easier. We sat there for a while, the TV playing in the background, the weight of the silence filling the space between us. And as the minutes ticked by, I realized that I wasn't alone in this. Tyler was there, and maybe that was enough for now. The house, though quieter, no longer felt like the same suffocating place it had been just hours ago. Jessica's absence, though painful, also left room for something new. Something that, while uncertain, was mine to rebuild. The minutes bled into hours as Tyler and I sat there, barely speaking, just the occasional clink of bottles as we made our way through a six-pack. It was exactly what I needed, quiet company. No forced conversation or awkward attempts to fix what couldn't be fixed. At some point, Tyler broke the silence. So what now? I sighed, leaning back into the couch, staring at the ceiling. Now, I file for divorce. That's the only step left, right? He nodded, understanding. Yeah, but you've got to look out for yourself, man. Don't let her take advantage of you during the process. Get a good lawyer. Protect your assets. I will, I muttered, though I had no idea where to start. The idea of navigating a divorce, with all its legal and financial entanglements, felt overwhelming. Jessica and I had built a life together. A shared mortgage, shared bank accounts, everything intertwined. Untangling that mess was going to be a nightmare. Listen, Tyler said, sitting up straighter. I know a guy. He helped my cousin when she went through her divorce. He's tough but fair. I can give you his info. I nodded. Yeah, send it over. Thanks. Tyler pulled out his phone, tapping out a quick message. You don't have to make any decisions tonight. Just focus on getting through the next few days. It's gonna suck, but you'll get through it. I knew he was right. The next few days, the next few weeks were gonna be rough. But at least I wasn't completely lost in the chaos anymore. I had a direction, however daunting it might be. After another long pause, Tyler stood up, stretching. You want me to stay over? Or you good? I glanced around the living room, the emptiness suddenly feeling a little more oppressive. But as much as I appreciated Tyler's offer, I needed to start adjusting to being on my own again. I'm good, man, I said, standing up and clapping him on the back. Thanks for coming over. Anytime, he replied, grabbing his jacket. Call me if you need anything. Seriously, I will. As I watched him walk out the door, I was struck by a strange sense of calm. The house felt empty, sure, but it also felt like a blank slate. For the first time in a long time, there was no pretending. There were no lies hanging in the air, no facade of happiness to maintain. It was just me in the raw reality of it all. I wandered back into the kitchen, tossing the empty beer bottles into the trash. The silence settled over me, but this time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt more like a pause, a moment to breathe before everything moved forward. I didn't go to bed right away. Instead, I found myself pacing around the house, stopping in front of the framed photos lining the hallway. Pictures of Jessica and me from vacations, anniversaries, celebrations. Moments that had felt so real at the time, but now seemed like ghosts of a life that never truly existed. I pulled one of the photos off the wall. It was from our honeymoon. A beach in Hawaii, both of us smiling, arms around each other. I stared at it for a long time, remembering how perfect that trip had seemed, how in love we had been, or at least how in love I thought we were. With a deep breath, I put the photo down, face down on the table. I wasn't ready to get rid of it just yet, but I also didn't want to keep staring at it. One step at a time. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. I woke up to the sunlight filtering through the blinds, and for a moment, everything felt normal, until the weight of the previous night hit me all over again. I dragged myself out of bed and went through the motions. Shower, coffee, checking emails. It felt mechanical, like I was just going through the checklist of a life that no longer fit. But I kept moving because what else was there to do? By mid-morning, I decided to take a walk. Sitting around the house wasn't going to help, and I needed to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, as it usually was on a Saturday. Couples were out walking their dogs. Families were loading into cars for weekend activities, and I couldn't help but feel like I was watching the world from the outside. As I walked, I passed by the park where Jessica and I used to go sometimes, back when we were still trying to make time for each other. The memories flickered in the back of my mind, but I pushed them away. There was no point dwelling on what was already gone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Tyler. "Sent you the lawyer's info. His name's Ben. Call him when you're ready." I stared at the message for a moment before typing back a quick thanks. The idea of calling a lawyer made everything feel even more real, but I knew I had to do it. I walked for another half hour, letting my mind wander. The shock was still there, but it wasn't as sharp. It was starting to dull, settling into a quiet acceptance. Jessica was gone. The marriage was over, and now I had to figure out what came next. When I got back home, I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone. I opened the contact Tyler had sent me and stared at the number for a long time. Finally, I took a deep breath and hit the call button. A woman's voice answered on the other end. "Law Office of Ben Harris. How can I help you?" I swallowed hard. "Hi, my name's Nick Thompson. I need to talk to someone about a divorce." "Of course, Mr. Thompson," the receptionist replied smoothly. "I'll transfer you to Mr. Harris. He's in the office today." I rubbed my temple as I waited, the faint sound of hold music filling the silence. The reality of the situation was still settling in, but now it felt more like a heavy fog than a sudden impact. Divorce. The word felt distant, yet it was now the cornerstone of what my life had become. A click on the line interrupted my thoughts, and a new voice greeted me. "Nick, this is Ben Harris. Tyler told me you might be reaching out. How can I help you?" "Hey, Ben," I said, my voice steadying. "Yeah, it's a mess. I need to start the divorce process." Ben's tone was professional but empathetic. "I'm sorry to hear that. Why don't you walk me through the situation? The more I know, the better I can advise you." I spent the next several minutes laying out the basics of the story. The affair, how I'd found out, the separation. Ben listened without interrupting, only occasionally making a sound of acknowledgement. I wasn't used to telling this to someone who wasn't emotionally involved in the situation. With Tyler, the details had felt raw, but now, with Ben, it felt clinical. Like I was laying out the facts in a case rather than reliving my personal disaster. When I finished, Ben took a deep breath before responding. "First of all, I'm sorry you're going through this. I know it's a lot to handle, but it sounds like you've already made some important decisions. Based on what you've told me, it's clear you're ready to move forward. So let's talk about the next steps." He walked me through the process. Filing the petition for divorce, what to expect regarding the division of assets, and the reality of how Jessica might respond. "There's no telling how cooperative she'll be," he added. "Some people just want it over with while others try to drag things out. But the key is staying calm and staying ahead. I'll make sure we protect your interests." I absorbed his words, nodding even though he couldn't see me. "Okay," I said, the weight of everything sinking in a little deeper. "What do you need from me to get started?" "I'll send over a checklist of documents and information we'll need to file. Once you have everything ready, we can draft the paperwork and officially begin the process." After a few more details and assurances that I wasn't rushing into anything blind, we wrapped up the call. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the phone in my hand. The next step was happening whether I was ready or not. I spent the rest of the day pulling together the documents Ben had requested. Financial records, proof of property ownership, anything that tied Jessica and me together legally. Each document felt like a reminder of what had once been a partnership and was now just another thing to untangle. By the time I finished, the sun had started to dip low in the sky, casting a warm, orange glow through the windows. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the small stack of papers in front of me. It felt surreal, this process of dismantling a life I'd thought was solid. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel the same crushing sadness I'd felt before. There was still pain, sure, but it was mixed with a sense of determination. I was taking control of the situation, and maybe that was the key to surviving it. A knock on the door startled me from my thoughts. I stood up, half expecting it to be Tyler again, but when I opened the door, I froze. It was Jessica. She stood there on the porch, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, her face pale and tired. She had clearly been crying, her eyes red and puffy. For a second, neither of us spoke, the weight of our last conversation hanging between us. "Nick," she finally said, her voice shaky. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, the instinct to shut the door in her face almost overwhelming. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was some buried part of me that still needed closure. Either way, I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the space like she was seeing it for the first time. I needed to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, keeping my distance. "What is there to talk about, Jessica? You've said enough." She winced, clearly not expecting my cold tone. "I know," she whispered, tears already welling up again. "But I couldn't leave things like this. I made a mistake, a huge mistake." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. "I've been going over it all in my head," she continued, her voice breaking. "Every moment, every decision I made. I don't know how I let it get this far. I was lost, Nick, and I hurt you in the worst way possible." "You did," I said simply. There was no point in sugarcoating it. She wiped at her eyes, her breathing uneven. "I don't expect you to forgive me. But I don't want it to end like this, with nothing but anger between us." "What did you think would happen, Jessica?" I snapped, unable to hold back anymore. "You lied to me for months. You destroyed everything we built. And now you want what? Closure? Peace of mind?" Her lip trembled, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I used to know, the one I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But the anger was still there, burning just beneath the surface. "I want you to know that I regret it," she whispered, her voice raw. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I need you to know that." I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. The part of me that had loved her for so long still wanted to believe her, still wanted to feel something other than anger. But the betrayal was too deep, too real. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said slowly. "I don't know if I even want to try." Jessica nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I understand." The silence between us was suffocating, and I could feel the finality of it pressing down on both of us. There was nothing left to say. She took a step toward the door, her movements slow and hesitant, like she was waiting for me to stop her. But I couldn't. "Goodbye, Nick," she whispered as she opened the door. "Goodbye, Jessica," I said softly. The door closed behind her, and just like that, she was gone. For real this time. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, the echo of her last words ringing in my ears. "Goodbye, Jessica." It felt final this time, like the end of a chapter one had been struggling to close. The house was still, the kind of silence that feels both comforting and hollow at the same time. I sank back onto the couch, my thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. I had thought I might feel something more, some kind of closure or release after seeing her again, but all I felt was tired. The anger, the betrayal, it was all still there, but it was starting to feel like background noise, a dull ache that I was learning to live with. I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages without really seeing them. It wasn't until my eyes landed on Ben's name that I stopped. The lawyer, the divorce, that's what came next. I fired off a quick email, attaching the documents I had gathered earlier, and hit send. The moment I did, it felt like I had taken a step forward, one small but crucial step in taking back control of my life. Whatever happened now, I was done looking back. I stood up and wandered over to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. It was strange how normal everything outside seemed. like the world was still moving at its usual pace while mine had come to a grinding halt. But that was the thing about life, it didn't stop, even when you wanted it to. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. I went to work, I came home, I ate dinner alone in front of the TV. The house still felt empty, but I was starting to get used to it. Each day, the memory of Jessica's betrayal felt a little less sharp, a little less like an open wound and more like a scar that would eventually heal. Tyler checked in with me regularly, always offering to grab a drink or hang out if I needed a distraction. I took him up on it a few times, but mostly I found myself craving the quiet. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what came next. It wasn't until the following week that I heard from Ben. His email was short and to the point. The divorce papers were ready to be filed. All I had to do was sign them and we could move forward. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. This was it. The final step in cutting ties with Jessica for good. Part of me hesitated, wondering if I was really ready for this. But the answer came quickly, yes. I was ready. There was no going back, no saving what had been lost. This was the only way forward. I made an appointment to meet with Ben the next day, and as I walked into his office, I felt a strange sense of calm. The weight of the decision was heavy, but it was also liberating. This was the first step toward rebuilding my life, toward finding something that wasn't tainted by betrayal. Ben greeted me with a firm handshake and a professional smile. "Glad you could make it, Nick. Let's get this over with." We sat down at his desk, and he laid out the papers in front of me. The language was dry, legal, but the impact was personal. Each signature felt like I was carving out a new path, one without Jessica in it. When I was done, Ben looked up from the papers, his expression thoughtful. "You've made a tough decision, but it's the right one. From here on out, we'll take care of the details. You don't have to worry about a thing." "Thanks," I said, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. "I appreciate everything you've done." He nodded, sliding the papers into a folder. "We'll be in touch once everything's finalized. If you need anything in the meantime, just give me a call." As I left the office, the cool fall air hit me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The divorce wasn't finalized yet, but in my mind, it was already done. The chapter was closed. Now it was time to start a new one. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, into anything that would distract me from the lingering echoes of my old life. I cleared out the last of Jessica's things from the house, packing them into boxes and leaving them by the front door. I didn't know when she would come to collect them, but I didn't care. As far as I was concerned, she was already gone. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, I realized something. For the first time since I found out about the affair, I wasn't thinking about Jessica. My mind wasn't consumed by the betrayal, by the what-ifs or the anger. I was just existing, and that felt like progress. It was slow, but I was healing. A few days later, I got a text from Tyler. "Meet me at Murphy's tonight. It's been too long since we had a real hangout." I smiled, typing back a quick reply, "Be there at 8. That night, sitting at the bar with Tyler, laughing and sharing stories, I realized something else. Life was moving forward. I was moving forward. And as daunting as it felt at times, there was a part of me that was excited about what came next. The scars were still there, and they always would be, but I was no longer defined by them. The night at Murphy's with Tyler was exactly what I needed. For the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again, laughing at stupid jokes, catching up on life outside of the bubble I'd been trapped in. It felt like the beginning of something new, even if I wasn't entirely sure what that something was yet. A few weeks passed in relative quiet. The divorce paperwork had been filed, and now it was just a matter of waiting for everything to be finalized. I had moved Jessica's things out, rearranged the house to feel less like the life we'd shared, and more like mine. It was strange, but it also felt like I was reclaiming my space, one small piece at a time. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee and scrolling through emails, I noticed a message from my boss, Greg. The subject line was simple, "New opportunity." My curiosity piqued. I opened the email. "Nick, I've been impressed with how you've handled things these past few months, especially given everything you've been going through. I wanted to talk to you about a potential promotion, something more leadership-oriented. Let me know if you're interested, and we can set up a meeting." I stared at the email for a few seconds, the words sinking in. Promotion. It was the last thing I expected, especially with everything that had been happening in my personal life. But the idea of stepping into something new, something challenging, was appealing. It felt like a chance to start fresh in more ways than one. I shot back a quick reply, setting up a meeting for later in the week. As I hit send, I felt a flicker of excitement, something I hadn't felt in a while. The days leading up to the meeting with Greg were surprisingly calm. I went through the motions of work, caught up with Tyler a few more times, and slowly began to settle into a new routine. The chaos of the past few months was starting to fade, replaced by a steady sense of rebuilding. On the day of the meeting, I arrived at the office feeling more focused than I had in weeks. Greg greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "Good to see you, Nick," he said, leading me into his office. We spent the next half hour discussing the promotion. It was a step up, a leadership position that would involve managing a team, overseeing projects, and helping to shape the direction of the company. It was the kind of challenge I had been craving, something to throw myself into fully. "I think you'd be a great fit for this role," Greg said, leaning back in his chair. "You've shown a lot of resilience and adaptability lately, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for you to take the next step." I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. "I'm definitely interested," I said, the words feeling right as they left my mouth. "I'm ready for something new." Greg smiled, standing up and extending his hand. "Glad to hear it. Let's make it happen." As I left the office, I felt a strange mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and something else I couldn't quite place. This was a new chapter, a real turning point. The past was finally starting to feel like it was behind me. That evening, I called Tyler to tell him the news. He was predictably pumped, launching into an enthusiastic string of congratulations. "Dude, this is exactly what you need. A fresh start, something to focus on. You're going to crush it." "I hope so," I said, chuckling. "It's a big change, but I'm ready." "Of course you are," Tyler said confidently. "Look at everything you've already handled. This is just the next step." We talked for a while longer, planning a celebratory night out for the weekend. It felt good to have something to look forward to, something positive to anchor myself to as everything else continued to shift. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of preparation. I started transitioning into my new role at work, meeting with my new team, and getting a feel for the responsibilities I'd be taking on. It was a challenge, but it was exactly what I needed. A distraction, a purpose, something to fill the space that Jessica's betrayal had left behind. One evening, after a particularly long day, I found myself sitting on the back porch again, a beer in hand, staring up at the stars. The cool breeze swept through the yard, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt content. Not happy exactly, but at peace with where I was. The divorce was still in the process of being finalized, but the weight of it no longer hung over me like a dark cloud. I was moving forward, rebuilding my life in ways I hadn't expected. And while the pain of what had happened with Jessica was still there, it didn't consume me anymore. It was just a part of my story, a chapter that was finally closing. As I sat there, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky, I realized that I didn't need answers anymore. I didn't need to understand why Jessica had done what she did, or why our marriage had fallen apart. What mattered now was what I did next. The future felt wide open, full of possibilities I hadn't considered before. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of the unknown, of the blank slate in front of me. I raised my beer to the night sky, a silent toast to whatever was coming next. I didn't know what it would look like, but I was ready. I was ready to start again.